The record is on. So, good evening. Um, Welcome to another topic under international politics. This is based on Cold War. Uh, we get to understand what Cold War is and a brief of, the events and what has happened so far. So, I have a few contents here. I couldn't cover so much, but while we are with Chief to come and do more justice to this, so these are a few contents that could come up with the slide. So the key facts. Oh, I think that slide is missing now. I don't know. Okay, so the Cold War era. It covers the backdrop of the entire book. This is the overview. The end of the Cold War is usually seen as the beginning of a contemporary era in the world politics, which is the subject matter of this book. It is therefore appropriate that we begin the story with a discussion of Cold War. The chapter shows how the dominance of two superpowers, the United States of America and the Soviet Union, was central to the Cold War. It tracks the various arenas of Cold War in different parts of the world. So the non-aligned movement as a challenge to the dominance of two superpowers and describe the attempts by the non-aligned countries to establish a new international economic order, NIEO, as a means of attaining economic development and political independence. It concludes with an assessment of India's role in NAM and asks how successful the policy of non-alignment has been in protecting India's interests. So, although we won't be able to cover that part of India, but even when Chief comes in. So, the picture you have here is depicting the end of the Second World War, led to the rise of two major centers of power. So the picture above symbolizes the victory of the US and the USSR in Second War. So I didn't have the first one here, but in the first picture, the American soldier raising the US flag during the Battle of the Iwo Jima, Japan. So that happened in 23 February 1945. And the second picture, which is what we have here, is the Soviet soldiers raising the USSR flag on the Reichstag building in Berlin, Germany. That was in May 1945. So Cuban Missile Crisis. In April 1961, sorry, in case Chief comes in, let me know so you know, I know where to just pause. So Cuban Missile Crisis in April 1961, the leaders of the USSR were worried that the USA would invade communist-ruled Cuba and overthrow Fidel Castro. Fidel Castro is one of those powerful that we can always recall as one powerful leader. The president of the small island nation off the coast of the United States. Cuba was an ally of Soviet Union and received both diplomatic and financial aid from it. Nikita Khrushchev, the leader of the Soviet Union, decided to convert Cuba into a Russian base. In 1962, he placed nuclear missiles in Cuba. The installation of these weapons put US, the first time, under fire from close range and nearly doubled the number of bases or cities in American mainland which could be threatened by the USSR. 3 weeks after the Soviet Union had placed the nuclear weapons in Cuba, the Americans became aware of it. The US President John F. Kennedy and his advisors were reluctant to do anything that might lead to full-scale nuclear war between the two countries, but they were determined to get Khrushchev to remove the missiles and nuclear weapons from Cuba. Kennedy ordered American warships to intercept any Soviet ships heading to Cuba as a way of warning the USSR of its seriousness. A clash seemed imminent in what came to be known as Cuban Missile Crisis. So that was the origin. The prospects of this clash made the whole world nervous, for it would have been no ordinary war eventually. To the world's great relief, both sides decided to avoid war. The Soviet ships slowed down and turned back. So, um, still on the same story, the Cuban Missile Crisis was a high point of what came to be known as the Cold War. The Cold War referred to the competition, the tensions, and a series of confrontations between the US and the Soviet Union, backed by their respective allies. Fortunately, however, it never escalated into a hot war, that is a full-scale war between these two powers. There were wars in various regions with the two powers and their allies involved in warfare and in supporting regional allies, but at least the world avoided another global war. The Cold War was not simply a matter of power rivalries, of military alliances, and of the balance of power. These were accompanied by a real ideological conflict as well, a difference over the best and the most appropriate way of organizing political, economic, and social life all over the world. The Western Alliance, headed by the US, represented the ideology of liberal democracy and capitalism, while the Eastern Alliance, headed by the Soviet Union, was committed to the ideology of socialism and communism. You have already studied these ideologies in class 11. I don't know if you guys were in class 11.
I think maybe just from the way the lecturer grab it.
Okay, so
So
Cold
I've
War.
not studied it.
Cold War. The end of the Second World War is a landmark in contemporary world politics. In 1945, the Allied forces, led by the US, Soviet Union, Britain, and France, defeated the Axis powers led by Germany, Italy, Japan, ending the Second World War, 1939 to 1945. The war had involved almost all the major powers of the world and spread out to regions outside Europe, including Southeast Asia, China, Burma, now Myanmar, which is really, really under tense, considering the issues going on there now, and parts of India's northeast. The war devastated the world in terms of loss of human lives and civilian property. The First World War had earlier shaken the world between 1914 and 1918. So it's worthy to know that the Second World War was really that disastrous, devastating, that led to so many what's it called, international conventions, decision making, that made the world what it is at the moment. So the end of the Second World War was also the beginning of the Cold War. So, which why we're studying this. The World War ended the United States when the United States dropped two atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August,
Nagasaki.
causing Japan to surrender. Critics of this US decision to drop the bombs have argued that the US knew that Japan was about to surrender and it was unnecessary to drop the bombs. They suggest that the US action was intended to stop the Soviet Union from making military and political gains in Asia and elsewhere, and to show Moscow that the United States was supreme, which I really, ally with, I'll agree with this fact or with this opinion anyway. So US supporters have argued that the dropping of the atomic bombs was necessary to end the war quickly and to stop further loss of American allied lives. American and allied lives. Whatever the motives, the consequence of the end of the Second World War was the rise of two new powers on the global stage. With the defeat of Germany and Japan, the devastation of Europe, and in many other parts of the world, the United States and Soviet Union became the greatest powers in the world with the ability to influence events anywhere on earth, which we still experience till today. So this is just like showing the containment of Truman Doctrine. So we can research further on this. The emergence of two power blocks. The two superpowers were keen on expanding their spheres of influence in different parts of the world. In a world sharply divided between the two alliance systems, a system was supposed to remain tied to its protective superpower to limit the influence of other superpower and its allies. The Western Alliance was formalized into an organization, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, which came into existence in 1949. It was an association of 12 states which declared that armed attack on any one of them in Europe or North Africa, North America rather, would be regarded as an attack on all of them. An injury to one is an injury to all of them. Each of these states would be obliged to help the other. The Eastern Alliance, known as Warsaw Pact, was led by the Soviet Union. It was created in 1955, and its principal function was to counter NATO's forces in Europe. So I have this map here depicting, the NATO member and also the EU member. So, and that's to show what their spread looks like and how they come together to form their alliance. I think what we have as a replica here in Africa would be like the ECOMOG of ECOWAS. Arenas of the Cold War. The Cuban Missile Crisis that we began this chapter with was only one of the several crises that occurred during the Cold War. The Cold War also led to several shooting wars. But it is important to note that this crisis and wars didn't lead to another world war. The two superpowers were poised for direct confrontations in Korea, 1950 to 1953, Berlin, 1958 to 1962, and Congo, the early 1960s. In several other places, crisis deepened as neither of the parties involved was willing to back down. When we talk about arenas of Cold War, we refer, therefore, to areas where crisis and war occurred or threatened to occur between alliance systems, but didn't cross certain limits. A great many, a great many lives were lost in some of these arenas like Korea, Vietnam, and Afghanistan, but the world was spared in nuclear war and global hostilities. In some cases, huge military buildups were reported in many cases. Diplomatic communication between the superpowers couldn't be sustained and contributed to the misunderstanding. So this might be the concluding slide based on what I was able to come up with. So the Cold War timeline in 1947, American President Harry Truman's doctrine about the containment of the communism. So we had one earlier, that was a picture. 1947 to 1952, Marshall Plan, US aid for the reconstruction of the Western Europe. Then in 1948 to 1949, Berlin blockade by the Soviet Union and the airlift of supplies to the citizens of the Western Berlin by the US and its allies. So 1950 to 1953 was the Korean War. So do we have Chief in here now?
Not yet.